Hello and welcome back to this damn Palladialistic Crusade. This video will be a review of the absolutely beautiful Criterion Blu-ray release, spine number 917 of the iconic screwball comedy masterpiece from 1937, directed by Leo McCarey and starring Cary Grant and Irene Dunne. I'm of course referring to The Awful Truth. This is from a brand new 4K restoration undertaken by Sony Pictures and with their licensing deal via Criterion. Criterion has released it on Blu-ray along with a number of other classic Columbia titles featuring Cary Grant. These were all previously restored in the DVD era back in 2006 and presented in a DVD box set, which I have here in the Cary Grant box set collection. All of these are, full 4K upgrades in terms of their restoration and here with The Awful Truth, it is a lightning leap forward in both picture and sound with this beautiful art design from Criterion. So I wanted to do a full-length review on this particular title because it's a very beloved title for myself and many others. It's one of the absolute screwball comedy gems. If you've never seen this film, it is a heartwarming delight from start to finish, whether it's the first time you're seeing it or the 10,000th time you're seeing it. It never gets old. And also, it is very important in Cary Grant's career because this is the film that really undoubtedly broke him as a major star in the classic Hollywood era. He had been on the rise for some time. You can trace his earlier career in his early films. You can see things really weren't quite gelling, and a lot of this has gone over in the really nice extensive extras package, but it's really the key film in Grant's career that really solidified him as the Hollywood icon we all know and adore. And of course, Leo McCarey, the director, had a great deal to do with that. So I guess we'll start with the packaging. It's in the standard Criterion Skinovo case with this really gorgeous gold, black and white design aesthetic with a very deco style to some of the font. And that follows over onto the spine. I really like what they did here. It's a very classy look. It very much fits the film and the sort of rich world that the Warners, the couple in the film, sort of move around in. Then the insert, try to get the glare off of it. The actual interior art is very simple, but again, carrying over that same aesthetic, so it works wonderfully. There it is without the booklet in there. And the booklet is wonderful because not only does it carry over the aesthetic, but what I really like is that you have the central pair of the film sort of divided by the booklet. And then, of course, when you hold it open, they're reunited once more. This is basically sort of trying to replicate the iconic scene in the nightclub that turns into this sort of wonderful bit of screwball with what happens with the Warners and their various dates that they have there. The booklet itself has a great essay by Molly Haskell on the film. She proclaims it not only her favorite screwball comedy, but the greatest screwball comedy of all time. I always find it hard to speak in absolutes because I love so many screwball comedies and I haven't seen all of them by any means. But this is definitely one of the great beloved films I can return to time and time again, and part of this sort of subgenre of films, the Cary Grant-led screwball comedies, primarily these films made at Columbia that are often packaged together. So, of course, this release goes hand in hand with other films like Holiday, and then Only Angels Have Wings, His Girl Friday, all of these released by Criterion, and then other non-Columbia films like Bringing Up Baby and The Philadelphia Story, which are now also on Criterion as well. Again, the essay is wonderful, and then we get our usual technical notes and details on the 4K restoration. Then to show you the rear really quick, so that way I've covered all the packaging. It's in the standard Criterion style, but again, I really like this gold, black and white aesthetic, and of course, they have worked in Mr. Smith, the Warner's pet dog, who of course is really the third of this trio and all important to the events of the film. And of course, for classic movie nerds, you will recognize the dog Skippy as the same dog who portrayed the iconic Asta in the Thin Man series. Now, to get on to the good stuff in terms of the transfer and the actual innards of the disc itself. So to just briefly read you what is included here about the transfer notes, and that way I can get all the verbiage over correctly. The Awful Truth is This new digital restoration was undertaken by Sony from a transfer in 4K through a wetgate film scanner at Cineric in New York. The original negative is lost for the film, so they had to use a 1943 nitrate duplicate negative for the majority of the restoration, along with bits of a nitrate print held at the UCLA Film and Television Archive. They also used a nitrate fine-grain print for a handful of frames that were either missing or irreparably damaged from the two primary sources. And then there was additional cleanup work done by the Prasad Group in India. Then in terms of the soundtrack, it was remastered by Audio Mechanics in Burbank, California, using primarily a 35mm soundtrack positive that had been created by YCM Labs back in 2002 from the original 35mm nitrate soundtrack negative. And I believe that's what's been used on the previous Sony DVDs. And then, like I said before, the last time they attempted a restoration, which was on the 2006 DVD box set. Then additionally, the music cues were taken from a new transfer of the original soundtrack negative, and that was done at Deluxe. So basically, they did a full-blown restoration of the film's soundtrack as well, in addition. So it's gone far beyond the old work. So those are the main technical notes, and it's really helpful because Sony is known for, or at least to me, when you hear Sony's restored something, they try to do their due diligence, and it's really great to get the full technical notes of what they did and the work that happened. So even though it's Criterion handling the Blu-ray disc itself, this is one case where, of course, the bulk of the work was already done by Sony and in 4K. I don't know how much more resolution a 4K UHD presentation of this would have. You would get some improvement, of course, over the 1080p Blu-ray, but it's a beautiful source master. Now, in terms of how this compares to the old 2006 restoration on the old DVD and previous versions and how's the film look and sound, it's absolutely brilliant. The picture looks absolutely fantastic. The grading feels absolutely natural. There is detail that was simply not there on the old 2006 restoration, and it's absolutely beautiful to look at. You can't take your eyes off of it. Particularly, you'll notice greater clarity even in close-ups, and what I found on this particular viewing most notable visually, in addition to just losing myself in the film again, I really was able to just better see there's a luminous quality that Irene Dunne has in this film. Not only is she one of the great actresses of classic Hollywood, but when she's paired with Grant in this film, there's a certain chemistry they have that is different from what Grant had with, say, Katharine Hepburn or in his other screwball comedies. It's a different one, and there's a more delicate balance underneath the charm and the witty back and forth and the repartee that befits a married couple that splits up at the beginning of the film, and then the rest of the film is how in the heck are they going to get back together, because that they are, because they're absolutely perfect for each other, and it's mad that they split up in the beginning, and that's the joy of the film, is the chase, the journey. But there are many close-ups and reaction shots where you have Irene Dunne looking on, and there are just moments where she's absolutely luminous and she almost glows on the screen, and that really comes across in this transfer beautifully. So it is a absolutely fantastic restoration effort courtesy of Sony. And then just as impressive is the audio restoration work, because the soundtrack feels rejuvenated. It is, of course, the film's original mono mix, losslessly presented. But again, it just sounds rejuvenated. It sounds light years ahead of the old DVD, which sounds almost a bit muffled by comparison. I don't have any releases earlier than that, which I'm sure are probably a bit rougher around the edges. There was a Laserdisc release, but it is an earlier disc with analog-only sound, so I never picked it up because, of course, I'm really more of a fan of Laserdisc with digital audio. I don't know if I don't really think that would probably have a better sounding audio track, because of course you are dealing with print elements back in the day in terms of video, and since this is already head and shoulders above what was already on the 2006 audio restoration, they really did a heck of a job with this. So it's one of those where I can wholeheartedly recommend the disc for both picture and sound, because Sony really did a fantastic job on this. It is a beautiful transfer. It's the best I've ever seen this film look and sound. I was really very, very much impressed by the presentation. So this gets my wholehearted recommendation. I never know with classic era films how the soundtrack is going to sound. Most reviews kind of just skimp over that and don't compare necessarily to older releases or pre-restoration, or look with more of a fine-tooth comb at what the audio is doing. But that was a wonderful surprise. But of course, with a Criterion release, that isn't everything. So now we talk about the extras package. And in the supplemental features, I'll list off each of them and sort of give basically a miniature review of each, because I try to cover every aspect of a disc and look at every single extra and commentary and so on and so forth before I even think about putting together a review. So the extras package on the Criterion release includes there is a brand new interview with Gary Giddens about Leo McCarey, which is a really great piece. It's actually pretty extensive and done in a very nice, down-to-earth sort of way. And he gets into not just a little bit of background on Leo McCarey, who is woefully underrated in this day and age, and outside of film text and critical circles, you don't see his name bandied about much, if at all. But of course, leading up to The Awful Truth in 1937, in the same year, making Make Way for Tomorrow, the fantastic drama that sort of got overlooked, and then McCarey winds up winning Best Director for The Awful Truth, and deservedly so, because of course the film is a masterpiece of direction, more so when you know about the production and the extremely improvised nature of the film, which was nerve-wracking for most of the cast and crew. But he famously, when he won his Oscar, said, "You gave it to me for the wrong film," thinking that Make Way for Tomorrow was the higher artistic triumph. And it is a great film, but that is really, in a way, slighting the art of comedy, because comedy is not an easy thing to do. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's actually harder than making a great searing drama. But it's a great, again, pretty extensive, again, talking head interview piece, but mixed in with a lot of great stills and clips from the film. And it's just extremely revealing and rewarding. And again, talks a little bit about, Grant becoming... getting on a much surer ground in his early days of solidifying his career stardom, as it were, how McCarey built the relationship between Grant and Irene Dunne in the film, and how they built out of the original play the film was based on. The screenplay was written by Vina Delmar, but that didn't mean that was really what they followed. McCarey had a extensive background in classic silent comedy, directing some of the all-time great Laurel and Hardy comedy shorts. So it was no stretch for him to jump into the world of talking comedies. And basically what they wound up doing is improvising the vast majority of the picture, which drove everyone to absolute zaniness. Grant thought that it was going to be a massive failure, kept trying to get out of it, but eventually it seems everybody sort of caught on to what Leo McCarey was after, even though it was nerve-wracking to show up on the set every day and not have anything to do until somebody cooks something up. But it makes you appreciate the film all the more, because when you understand that a lot of the film was improvised in that manner and fashion, it's astonishing, because it seems so perfectly well poised and well written, like it took somebody just months of sweating out over a typewriter to get the right balance of dialogue and comedic scenes and everything. And on top of that, having to use the old Hollywood adage of having to work with animals or children. So here you have a frequent usage of the Mr. Smith character, of course, the Warner's dog. So, of course, having to deal and set up jokes and gags and specific directions with a dog in the middle of a comedy that you're mostly improvising on a day-to-day basis. It's just, how does somebody do that? The Best Director Oscar was well earned for this film. Then there is a new video essay by David Cairns on Cary Grant's performance and how The Awful Truth really, again, kick-started his career and firmly established him as the great star, primarily at this time, of romantic comedies, and put him out there as the leading man that was bankable and believable. It's a really well-done video essay. David Cairns does a lot of these. They're always well-researched, well put together, with a nice sort of trying to think of the right word, not quite snarky, but there's a little bit of humor in there that makes them play very well, and it's just always a joy to hear him talk on somebody. Then there's a really nice and revealing and candid 1978 interview done with Irene Dunne in her later years. It's not terribly long, but it's really nice to get personal insight and memories in a very candid manner from one of the original stars of the film. Then there is the Lux Radio Theater adaptation from 1939 with Cary Grant, but with Claudette Colbert playing the Irene Dunne role. And then again, as I mentioned before, we get the lovely Molly Haskell essay inside the booklet. And that concludes the extras section. So you do lose the handful of featurettes that are on the 2006 DVD set. So if you want to have absolutely everything, you can hang on to that. But pretty much all that stuff is covered in the new materials, whether it be about the film or Leo McCarey, Irene Dunne, or Grant, and the sheer importance of this film in Cary Grant's filmography. Again, it can't be overstated how important this was to his career, and how Leo McCarey was really one of the key directors that helped him to unlock his full on-screen potential. I think that it was definitely already there, and it's visible in earlier films. And I'd say from a fan and historical standpoint, you probably see it most the first time in Sylvia Scarlett, done 2 years before in 1935 with George Cukor and Katharine Hepburn. And then you see it again in 1936's Topper, which is the film basically in between Sylvia Scarlett and The Awful Truth. And then, it's fully cemented with Leo McCarey and Irene Dunne on The Awful Truth. So this is just one of the great American gems of the cinematic medium. It's a masterpiece in every sense of the word. It cannot be talked about or seen enough. It is one of the just treasures of the screwball comedy genre. It really doesn't have an equal. There is no other film quite like this. And I think the improvisational nature of the film's production really creates that. It's a film where the two sparring would-be romantic partners were, of course, originally romantic partners at the beginning of the film. So it's a bit different already from the outset from your typical screwball comedy, because the film starts and they're already together, and then they break up, and then again the fun is in the journey of how they wind up getting back together. But there's a beautiful mixture of a dash of the urbane, because of course the central couple are obviously on a higher class than most people, which helped Depression era audiences to be able to escape their day-to-day lives and rejoice in the hijinks of various characters in screwball comedy films like The Awful Truth. But there's also a absolute devotion and literally perfected slapstick technique, which of course is Leo McCarey showing off his intricate comedic chops and being able to pull things out of the actors. And of course, I haven't mentioned him yet, but Ralph Bellamy has a supporting role in this film, and it seems to basically be a preface to the same role he has later on in His Girl Friday. But he's absolutely wonderful in this film, and in a rather difficult role as the sort of for lack of a better term, the rich schmuck who doesn't realize that he's a bit of a bit of a silly fool, but that's a very difficult type of role to play. But the film is pretty much a two-hander between Cary Grant and Irene Dunne. It's one of the great screen relationships between Grant and Dunne. They would go on to do a handful of other films together, all of which are extremely rewarding. But this is just a magical gem. It never gets old, and we now have this beautiful Blu-ray presentation, spine number 917 from the Criterion Collection. So this is just a beautiful disc. I've been meaning to get it since it came out all the way back in 2018. So I'm really kicking myself that I didn't get this sooner. It's got a lovely little extras package, but it's one of the truly great films that you can't have enough extras, and it leaves you wanting more. So this is definitely a film that you can always come back to and rewatch time and time and time again. It is one of the great, iconic screwball comedies, one of the great comedies, period, one of the great films, period. If you've never seen this film, it's an absolute magical delight every single time, and you just fall in love with the film all over again. So in spite of what Leo McCarey would have had you believe, I do think he won the Oscar for the correct film for Best Direction. This film is a timeless delight that still is a magic experience for audiences. I've seen this in a number of different locations and varieties. It has never lost one iota of its magic. It still plays beautifully, like it was literally made yesterday. It's absolutely timeless. So this is Criterion's Blu-ray of The Awful Truth from the Sony 4K restoration. And who knows, maybe this could turn up on a 4K UHD release at some point, since the work was completed in 4K. But that does it for this particular video. I'm trying to get more Blu-ray reviews out there and more detailed ones, and trying to keep them at a more average length so I can focus more on the disc, because if I start waxing poetic about The Awful Truth, we'll be here for, the next 10 years, because again, if I haven't convinced you already, I've done a terrible job. But this is just one of the absolute magical delights of the cinema. It truly is. It's just a timeless masterwork that truly uplifts you even in the darkest days. Beautiful, beautiful title. And again, I'm trying to do Blu-ray reviews with a greater focus on the disc contents and the transfer and everything, so I can get into the nitty gritty and talk a little bit about the film and my appreciation of it and things like that. So you get a sense of the film itself, but we can stay focused on the Blu-ray release in question, and that way I don't get to one of my usual crazy epic runtimes for just a single Blu-ray review. But I want to give each title its due diligence. So if you've watched through this, thank you ever so much for watching, as always. So with that, definitely leave your comments and thoughts below. And if you've gotten this release, have you enjoyed it in the extras section? Maybe how do you think it compares to the old DVD? Maybe you haven't upgraded yet and have been on the fence, because, of course, it's hard to keep up with every single title you'd like. And then, of course, you try to wait for the Criterion sales to roll around at Barnes & Noble, perhaps, and then you lose track of titles that you really want. Then you remember all of a sudden you haven't got such and such title, and if you're like me, you just absolutely kick yourself like crazy. But anyway, definitely leave your comments about The Awful Truth, what you think about the Criterion release or other releases, or just, again, about the film in general, because it's just absolutely a timeless, magical gem, essential for comedy fans, screwball fans, Cary Grant fans for sure, fans of Leo McCarey, Irene Dunn fans. Again, it's just, or Skippy fans, fans of Skippy the dog. But again, it's just one of the films that you can't help but bring an absolute smile of pure delight to your face every time, even when you simply think of it, or some of the famous gags or famous lines or sequences or scenes. But anyway, as always, thank you ever so much for watching, and keep physical media alive, keep your disc spinning, and let's keep supporting our boutique labels.